Hey there, welcome to today's episode. It's going to be a live unedited session. We're going to be making a beat with Koala Sampler. Haven't done that on the channel for a little while, certainly narrated. I've been busy buying up old samplers and things, and it always takes you away from other bits of gear. But Koala has always been one of my first loves. It's kind of what got me an audience on the channel. And yeah, thought we could just make a beat today from scratch. No great idea. Let's just see what happens. So we're going to need some samples. We'll go into our samples folder. We could start by changing the BPM actually for the project, because this is a new project. It's 110 BPM. Let's set it down to, I don't know, 80 something. Let's go with 84. We'll take the swing off for now. We might apply some of that later on. And we can come back and start loading up samples. Now we could take a break. We could chop up a break. We could put some individual drum sounds in. And because I'm already amongst some individual drum samples, these particular folders, let's just go with that. So let's start with the kick drum. Got a bunch of random folders. I'll try and just pick some at will. Kind of like that one, very subdued, very thuddy. Let's put it into one-shot mode. I am just going to make sure that it's normalized. But yeah, kind of like that one. It's going to be nice when you layer some hi-hats on top. It's got a bit of breathing room. And let's find some hi-hats, some perks. See what we've got. That one's good enough, but I might pick two. Because I want to pick two from the same folder, I'm just going to go into half menu. I like this one, so I'm going to drag that one over, put that onto the next pad. And I think this one as well. So we got one that's kind of... Why is it not grabbing? There we go. We've got one that's kind of lo-fi. And then we got one that's a little bit brighter. It's also louder, but slightly different vibes. And then we can come back and we can find a snare drum. That one's kind of cool. Let's load that one up. Again, we'll normalize that just when I can see a little bit of lower volume or the waveform's not quite filling the window. You know, you can normalize it for a little bit more volume. You might want to play around with it later anyway, but just kind of a force of habit, I guess. Yeah, so we got these two here. Just going to make sure these are all one-shots. You can turn one-shot on by default with Koala. I've just got it turned off for some reason at the moment. I normally do have it on. Something like that's going to be good enough to get us started. Let's go to a sequence, make a sequence, and just put some drums in and see what happens. So we've got our kick up here. Need to make it down to, say, 16th notes, and we'll do, I don't know, one here, one here, one here. We'll just put them in typical places while we build. Snare drums here, and actually, let's put the snare drum over here. We'll switch it up a little bit so the rhythm's slightly more unusual. And we can put another kick drum maybe here. Let's do it here, see what happens. And then with the hi-hats, I'm just going to lay those out so we've got one across, and then it kind of alternates with this second hi-hat down here. Won't be great to start off with, but it's something. Okay, gonna actually slow it down a little bit more, maybe 82. Good enough. Velocity, I like to make constant velocity changes because it just sounds more realistic. I don't like everything at the same volume. Do that for pretty much every time I make a drum break, certainly. So let's do it like this, just a little bit of velocity variation in here. Now I hear the drums together, I'm not overly keen on the snare drum. I don't think it fits very well. I want to find a different one. All we can do is replace that one out. So if I take this, we delete it. The cool thing is you're not deleting the MIDI information. So as long as I load up another snare drum here, it's just going to keep the snares inside of the sequence. So we can find another snare. That one might work. It's got a lot of low end in it. But yeah, that could work. kind of the right vibe, but not quite what I want. We'll keep it there though. What we'll do is we might layer this. So let's use the tone. I'm going to use this tone filter or slider. Acts like a high pass and a low pass. We're technically going to be running it sort of like a high pass. I just want to take some of the low end out of that snare. Not that much. Now you can do that in more sort of detail if you move over to the mix. You can actually EQ it. But we'll just use the tone slider for now. I want something to layer over the top of that though. It's kind of the bass layer that I'm looking for, but we need something to add a little detail to it. That's a pretty cool clap. Not sure if this will work, but we can try putting it in and just see what happens. So we'll layer over with the clap. We could layer the two pads together, but then it's more of a permanent change. So I'd rather have it independent so we can just swap this out if we need to. Yeah, that's not sounding too bad other than the fact that this needs to be enabled as a one shot. So let's move over and turn it to a one shot. And actually, when I hear it like that, maybe we want to just reintroduce the low end back to this sample. So we'll come back to our tone slider, take that off. Yeah, I don't mind that now, actually. So we've got that set up. Volume-wise, we'll play around with that a little bit. I think maybe... yeah, somewhere around there. Just wanted to dial that in so that it wasn't too prominent. Hi-hats. I normally listen to them against something like the kick or the snare drum just to kind of get a feel for the volume. I think this one over here, and we can see it from the waveform, obviously it's still louder than the other hi-hat. We might just balance those out a little bit more. Let's maybe bring this one down to match. Yeah, that's not sounding too bad. From here, let's apply some effects. Actually, let's work on the sequence first before we get too far ahead of ourselves. I think I will just do a little bit of velocity variation here. I'm just going to make the second set of hats and snare drums even, and this kind of clap sound. I want to bring those down a little bit in volume. And I'm trying to work out if we do anything else in here. Let's make it 2 bars so that we can put a little bit of a switch up. Yeah, makes it obviously longer, but just slightly more interesting because between the first bar and the second bar, we're putting some variation. And I kind of like that where you got the 3 kicks here. I think we'll apply some effects to this. We could also try a little swing, but I'm not sure with this particular beat. I kind of like the rigidness to it. Let's try a little swing though and see what happens. Yeah, don't mind that. Just a small amount of swing. And yeah, now we can go to our perform page. We could use effects via a bus or on the main channel and do it that way. But sometimes I like just using these vanilla and strawberry effects. These are kind of like the performance effects because you'll see as you kind of move them around, they snap or they kind of bounce back. But if you press hold, you can just dial things in. So we could try applying maybe a little compression, a little bit of this dirty filter, which I'm assuming is adding some saturation, maybe like a little bit of distortion. just to try and gritty these up, see what it sounds like. Yeah, just a small amount of compression, pretty decent amount of that kind of grungy filter. And I might just turn these down a little bit more. Yeah, good enough. So let's resample that as a loop. We're now going to take individual MIDI drum sounds and bounce them all down to one audio file. It goes direct to a pad and it's an exact loop. We can go to our samples. Let's just commit and get rid of these. We need to make some changes to this. We can do, but we're going to move that up onto the first pad so that we're organized. And I think we'll keep the BPM the way it is. We could play around with it. Going to lose the old sequence with all the MIDI information. Open up a new one, and we just want to stretch that across for the 2 bars because that's going to be our drum loop that's going to play. It will do. Sometimes you have to give a little tap first. Going to come back to the sample, just take a quick look. Because we're resampling, obviously it's got a bit of a reduction in volume depending on how loud your pads are when you're before you resample is what I'm trying to say. So we'll normalize this. Good enough. I'm going to start pre-planning as well, so I want to send that to bus A. The reason for doing that is so that when it comes to just having a general mix of the track, we might send the drums to bus A, the sample chops to B, or whatever it is. Just a little bit of pre-prep saves me a step for later on. So I'm going to send those to bus A. When we take a look at the mixer, it means we've got independent volume control for the drums now. They'll be coming through here. And I think we might come in and take a little look at EQing these. Just a slight high-end boost. Everything else is pretty good. We're dipping the mids as well, I should say as well. Just a tiny little dip in the mids for now. Always tweak it later on. Let's now find a sample to chop up because we need something to start turning this from just a drum loop into a beat. We'll have a look at what have we got here. I know this is a Bunch of Beat Butcher melodic chops. They're from a bunch of different kits. I just threw them into folders to get them onto the SD card. But yeah, you might recognize some of them. They'll be mainly from the Filth series. Gonna load that one up. It's called Guns and Pork, which is pretty interesting. Now, we can sample chop by doing the traditional thing of selecting that sample, moving into tools, and you can auto chop. But what I sometimes like to do is just play around with individual pads. But there's a couple of things I want to do first. The first one is to make sure it's inside of a choke group. So I'll say choke group 1. And then what I can do is I can just move the start and end point so we can slide through the sample, just trying to find something that works that would be kind of the first slice point, if you like. And then we can just duplicate the pad through. The reason I like working like that is just gives me like a little bit more control over like pitching and things first. You can, of course, pitch once you've done your sample chopping. You can pitch before the sample chopping. But it's just a slightly different way of working where you can just pick out little bits that you like. Sometimes when you chop, and let's say you chop into 16 pieces, you might only use 2 or 3 of those pieces. So you end up with a bunch of stuff that you never use anyway. This way, it's kind of just a very lean way of working. So we'll normalize this as well. You want to make any changes, set your choke group before you start, because we're going to dial in one pad. And then when we duplicate it, we don't want to have to keep setting the choke group or normalizing or whatever else. So let's just do that beforehand. Now we can play our loop. Yeah. So, like a starting point, you found something that I think we could work with. Listening to the sample with the drums, it's kind of cool. It could work, but I don't know. I think maybe there's a better sample to play around with, but let's just see again. It's giving me kind of an MF Doom vibe, which is never a bad thing, but I don't think that's the sample that I want to use, so I'm going to bin that and we'll look for another one. That one's pretty cool. Do exactly the same thing though. I'm just going to do the sample chopping in the same way. I'm going to put this into choke group 1. We'll normalize. Then we'll probably just bring the volume down a little bit. Yeah, I kind of like the way that fits for the first part. Now what we'll do is maybe try and find a switch up to that. We can dial in and we can tidy up a little bit, but we can just make a duplicate and then we can find the next part. Because they're in a choke group, they're never going to play together at the same time. So we can just dial in the next piece that we're looking for. You get the idea. That bit works. Good enough for now. Let's record that in. What I'm looking for is maybe like a 3-bar repetition and then like a switch up. So we might have to double this up to make it 4 bars if we go into our sequence. And what have we just done there? I accidentally tapped that. Didn't mean to have that in there. Let's double it up. And we can record. So one thing I forgot to do before is make sure these were set to 1 shot. Should have done that before we started copying, but doesn't matter. And what I think is we need, throughout the 4 bars, we want that kind of 3 and then 1 repetition. Not repetition, but 1 switch up is what I mean. 3 repetition and then 1 switch up. So at the end, I'm going to put in another one because throughout the 4 bars, I kind of like the structure that we got here. We need to adjust this because I was recording all the way around. Let's just put those in. We can probably just do it manually. Now we know what the structure is. Can even just adjust these out a little bit as well. But we've got it like this. So for this end piece, we just need another switch up. So I'm going to make another duplicate. And there was a piece that I liked towards the end here. Might have to repeat it a little bit because it's quite short, but let's record that in. yeah, kind of like the vibe that that's got. Couple of things though, with the timing of it, we've snapped everything to the grid. I feel like we could afford to just drag that down and maybe take all of the slices except the first one, because I want that at the beginning of the loop. Then snapping off and just nudge those over ever so slightly to make them lazy. I think it will fit better with the timing of the drums. Yeah, it's kind of cool. I'd like to do something with the end bit though. I think it needs another piece. So we'll make a copy. Just find maybe something quiet in here somewhere. Well, not quiet, but just a little bit more low down. Because we've created a new slice, I'm going to shorten this at the end. Or actually, we don't even need to shorten it. We just need to take this one and we're going to drag it down because that's where I want the switch to be. Now, it doesn't really matter what the end slice is. I found a point that I thought might work. It doesn't really work, but as long as the MIDI clip's there, then we can just go back and we can start scanning through this last piece, trying out different sections till something works. Now, to save us a little bit of time, with Koala, you can loop up a section. So if we loop it from here to here, just so that we're only working in the last two bars so we don't have to listen to the whole thing round and round again. And then I can just start messing around with this last piece. So that stopped looping. Does it only loop when you're in here? I thought it just stayed looping. Maybe it only loops while you're inside of this view. I kind of assumed it didn't. Yeah, okay. I always thought you could do that. That's strange. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. We'll just listen to it and get the right piece at the end. Yeah, that kind of works. It's it's a bit of a repetition of that other piece. It's not my favorite, but rather than listening to it over and over, I mean, of course you can come in and you can just try out the piece yourself manually. I just wanted to do it that way. It is strange though. I always thought you could just hold this loop and then be back out and it would stay looping there, but I guess it just doesn't do that. So if we come back out, I just want to double check. Yeah, it loses the loop. That would be a nice feature to see, is that if I set a loop point like that, should be able to just come back out and be working and then come back in when I want to change the loop point I can. Let me know in the comments if I'm missing out on a trick there, because I always thought you could do that. Anyway, doesn't matter. generally the concept's there. I like the idea. One last time to run it through, I'll just mute the drums because I want to take a listen to the sample chops, just listen as they play around. Do we need to add any attack? Are there some weird unwanted noises, clicks and pops and things? And one thing there, if you increase the amount of attack, obviously it's like a fade in, so the more attack, kind of the longer the fade in, gives it almost like a sidechain feel. You can actually sidechain in Koala though, it does have a sidechain function. It's better when you've separated your drums so that you've just got the kick to sidechain to. Creatively, of course, you can sidechain still to like a full drum loop where it's going to sidechain, but then it's going to drop every time the kick and the snare comes in, anything that's pretty strong depending on the settings. I'm not going to bother. But sometimes that's a quick, hacky way that you can get a side chaining effect because you put like a slope on the front of it, longer attack. It's going to sound like it's ducking as that comes along. I'm going to dial it into there. It's, yeah, a hacky way of getting like a sidechain effect. What we need now, I think, is a bass line. One last test again would be to just mute the drums. Just listen to that sample, take a listen to how much bass is in the sample. Do you need to filter any of it out? But this one's leaving us plenty of room to put a bass line in, so let's do that. Samples, I want to find a bass sample. Got a bunch of folders with bass samples in as well. Looking for one that has a nice tail on it. Sometimes when people make sample packs and I don't really understand that, you've got a one-shot note. And it kind of happened there. It was a pretty good long bass sample, and then right at the end it just gets this really harsh cutoff. I always feel like if you're going to make a single individual note sample, it should always have a tail. Preferably a long sample so you can make it short if you need to. But yeah, I don't like it when they leave kind of like harsh chops on the end. Yeah, that one does it as well. Should just fade out. Now, we can use release inside a Koala. We could tweak it ourselves and put a fade in, but I'm just looking for one that works ideally. Yeah, that one's not bad. Let's take a look at it. But again, you can see from the waveform, it kind of just drops off at the end. What we can do is we could tweak that. Just take the end point. Go to our tools, we'll crop it. We'll apply, I'm going to normalize it first actually before we do this. And then what I'm going to do is we're going to go to release. Now, if we drag the release all the way across like this, it should put a very long fade out from the start point to the end. That might be a little heavy-handed. We'll drop it back to, say, here. What I might do quickly is just make a duplicate, because once you bounce this down, it's kind of permanent. But I just want to show you. And the other thing sometimes you need to have enabled is one-shot mode, otherwise it doesn't work. But if we go to Tools and then we bounce it, yeah, you can see it's just put a little fade at the end, but it will soften it. Or we can be harsher with that, where we could take it like this, and we could say we want a much longer release. Back into Tools and bounce that. Yeah, see the way it didn't actually change because it doesn't have one shot on. If you put one shot on and then bounce it, should change. Unless we've just turned our release off. Ah, sorry, we didn't dial the release in. That's my bad. Let's give it that amount of release. One shot is enabled. And bounce. Yeah, much better for the sample. So we've got this sample, we can now play around with it. I don't know what the key of that is, I don't have a good ear for that. It doesn't sound like C to me, I don't think. Oh, actually, I don't know. I'm just guessing. Let's pick the keyboard and choose this sample. I want to turn the volume down a little because it is quite loud. And we'll put it into a choke group of its own because it's a bass sample. I don't want it to overlap. I want to have one shot enabled still, and then we can change this to keyboard mode. I'm going to have it at chromatic so that we can just move around, see if we can work out a bass line that goes with the track. Doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. Koala being strange there, it's kind of double triggering. Let's just delete that out and we do it again. I'm actually going to do it with the drums on as well, just to make sure that the rhythm of it, kind of the bounciness. We currently have quantization set to 1/16 notes. There is a little bit of swing in here. I might turn quantization off for the bass line just to make sure it does have the kind of the rhythm that I'm looking for. One thing you can do as well, if you unlock this, is you can make it a little bit bigger. So if your fingers are bigger, you can spread this out a touch so it's easier to play. And hopefully what you noticed there before as well was that I did that at a higher pitch, because it's easier to work out the bass line sometimes when you can hear it more clearly, and then just pitch it down, or at least come down through the semitones, the octaves. Didn't completely repeat the bass line for that. I wanted to have it so that as it gets to the end of the 4 bars, there is a variation. So we've got one extra note in the first 2 bars, which will be this one here. And I'm actually just going to lower the volume of that one as well. Let's just take the velocity down a little bit. But other than that, it should be pretty good. Because we didn't have any quantization on, I am just going to check the first bass note at the beginning. So it should be over here. And just make sure it is right at the beginning of the grid, which it is. So we're good. All right, so we've got a bass line to go along with everything else. Having the switch up towards the 4th bar at the end here, where we've already got like a slightly different switch up anyway, I think just gives it a little bit of a break, gives a break to the listener. If you have it just repeat the whole way around with that extra note, I don't know, it just feels a little bit stale. Having that switch up would allow us to put in like another note or an effect or something that happens just to kind of signify the end of the 4 bars. So we've got that set up. That's our first sequence. Before we go any further and we try and, I don't know, just add more stuff to this, I'm going to make a duplicate of that first sequence. We're going to say that is like the, I don't know, like the main chorus, verse, whatever you want to call it. We could do with a break. So whenever I'm making beats like this, I want to have some kind of switch up, otherwise it just gets too repetitive. So we'll open this one up and we'll take a bunch of stuff back out. So I'm just going to grab all of these. So we don't want the bass line in here for now. We can get rid of that. And actually, I think really all I want is the drums. So all of these sample chops, which we know are the chops, we can get rid of those. And I'm going to drop it back down to 2 bars because I think 2 bars for a switch up is fine. And let's now add some kind of variation. We haven't got too many sample chops because of the way that we chopped up the sample, because we were just dragging it and copying the pad over. I suppose that's one benefit if you slice it into 16 and you've got a bunch of extra pads. Now we could sift through those pads and work out what we want as the switch up. So what we'll do here is we'll create a variation on any of these pads. It doesn't really matter which one. I just want something to begin with. So I'm going to take this one. We've got an extra bass line from before. We should tidy up and get rid of it, but I'm just going to leave it there. And now where we've got this switch up, I just want to look for another part of the sample to do something quite simple. Even if it's kind of repetitive, we can put a filter in or do something. I'm not sure yet, but let's work it out. Don't mind that as like the first piece. Let's take a copy of that. There's something there that's caught my ear. I think we can make that into a bit of a switch up. Now, it is repetitive, but if we apply some effects maybe to this one pad, so what we'll do is we'll send this sample over for now to, I don't know, bus B, because we already have something on bus A. So bus B is now where this one particular pad is going anyway. We'll apply some delay. We'll sync it, we'll make it, say, 1/8 notes, something like that. And we'll leave the mix kind of where it is. So this one sample now, it's got this delay effect to it. Now, I was thinking of switching between the two pads, but actually just hearing this on its own, kind of like that and the sort of timing of it. So we'll record that in. Let's put quantization back on, I think, for now, and record that to this second clip. Needs a little tweaking, but I think that works. I think we've then got something to switch between. So as it gets to the end of our chorus, verse, whatever it is, once we've had enough repetitions of that, we've got something to switch to. Now, my sequence snapping is off, which means we can bounce around kind of instantly. Normally, I leave that on sequence end, so it's going to play one and it's going to jump to the other. But I just wanted to test that to see what it sounded like moving from one part to the other. And I think that's okay. I think in order to kind of jazz this up, let's work on this breakdown sequence a little bit more and add some other elements. We took the bass line out. We've still got the bass note. Could have the bass line in the breakdown. Maybe we just apply a different bass line. Yeah, like that. Simple. Add something else to it. A little bit of an effect sound or something now, I think. Maybe we'll bring in a vocal or something, but we need transition, something, I don't know. Let's find something. Let's see what we got. Got a bunch of different transitions. Don't particularly like the shininess of this, but there's something maybe cool about the sample that we could use, particularly if we pitch this thing. We're going to take it out of keyboard mode. And going to run a bunch of the high end out. I'm going to record that and then we'll tweak it a little bit more. Little less volume. Obviously, I had to put it into one-shot mode as well because I hadn't triggered that before we started recording. And we've pitched it so the timing of it kind of fits with what we've got going on. Yeah, maybe let's find something else that goes along with that. I'm going to load that one, but we're going to take a bunch of the beginning of the sample off. Yeah, just another fade. Let's put it into one-shot mode. You'll notice, chop the beginning of the sample off. Little bit of fade in using the attack. Little bit of one-shot mode. And a bit less volume. All right, good enough. We need a little vocal sample or something. Now, I don't particularly want to go and spend time recording one. Obviously, we can sample from YouTube, places like that. I think we'll just use something that we've currently got loaded up. Might be one I've used before, but actually, I tell a lie because I haven't put vocal samples into my vocals folder. It's completely empty. So I guess we are going to have to do that. I was just trying to avoid any copyright issues. Let me think if I've got any other samples like that. Don't think I have. Let's take a look at Koalas. I don't think there's any vocal samples in the Koala stuff either, or maybe I'm wrong. Let me see. We got percussion, things like that. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what we could do. Let's use, which one of these has the little speech toy? This one, Holly.
Honestly, I'd prefer self-destruct button over stop complaining button for you.
Okay, so we've got this set up. Let's put it into half screen. We need to resample that. So actually come out for a second. Let's close this. Let's go to resampling. Just make sure that's set up. Then we can go back to samples. Got Holly here, which will load up. And then I don't really know what I wanted to say. Yeah, now I'm at a loss as to what to type in. Could be anything, couldn't it, really? Let's put the world turns on its axis. See what that sounds like.
The world turns on its axis. The world.
All right. Let's see about pitching it.
The world turns on its axis. 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 The world turns on its axis.
All right, let's leave it like that. Let's resample that in.
The world turns on its axis. The world.
Stop that. And close this up. We don't want this piece at the end. And we can crop that and normalize it.
The world turns on its axis.
What I might do is run it through the same bus that we got the sample chop on, because that's got a delay.
The world turns on its axis.
And just see what that sounds like in here. It's not typically the type of sample I'd use. I'd prefer something from an old movie. But rather than going through that process and making the video really long, plus getting stuck for copyright issues, let's just record that in here. Let's put it into one-shot mode.
The world turns on its axis. The world turns on its axis. The world turns on its axis.
Good enough, you get the idea. So that is the basic structure for a track, really, or for a beat. Something that you could certainly send out to somebody if you've got an artist in mind who wanted to obviously put their vocals over the top of it. I wouldn't make it particularly more complicated than that. I would probably take this one and make another duplicate of it. And what we do this time is just take the drums out so that we've got something that could act like an intro. So yeah, not bad. We need to just play around with that though in terms of kind of mixing it and everything else. So what I would do, I would simplify the project as a starting point. The other thing I think it's lacking a little bit, maybe we address that first, is just when we're playing, it gets to this main part. I actually think I want the little kind of this fade-in effect in here as well. And I think I want another sample, another little effect sound or something, just as it gets to the end of the second bar. I don't want that kind of fade in to be every 2 bars. I think it would get too repetitive. So it can be at the beginning of a 4-bar loop. But in the middle of that 4-bar loop, I think we should find something else, an effect sound. Let's see what we got here. Is there anything inside of these folders just while we're here? Effect sounds. It's got some effects. Let's see what this sounds like. That one's kind of cool. Might just be a piece of that, but I think that could work somewhere in here. We'll just record it into place and then we'll chop it. Okay, so volume's a little off, let's do that. Let's send it through the same delay, so to bus beat. Just needed something in that main part. Of course, we could add loads more details to it when you build out a song and you start having multiple copies of that one particular sequence. So the 4 bar is going to repeat multiple times to create like a verse, a chorus, whatever. Then you'd want to put more switches in. You want one maybe where the drums drop out a little bit. In fact, we could actually do that. Let's make a copy of this one and say towards the end here, we want the drums to drop out. You might have to dial this in when you've got like a loop just to make sure that there's no kind of weird unwanted noises, but just play around with it. And for this example, that's fine. It's just little variations, small details, things that you can switch up between. So that is really the basis of a track that's laid out there. There's a couple of things that I'd want to start doing to tidy up, and that's probably just to get the sample chops down to one particular track. The way that you do that is you just mute out the things that you don't want. So with this first one here, or actually, can we do it just from the intro? Actually, no, because that's still got our bass line in. So let's just work it off the first loop, the first 4 bar loop. I'm going to mute the drums. We're going to mute the bass. Can't remember which one of those samples. I think it's the left one, but we got 2. We're going to get rid of all of the sound effects. And that should just be the sample chops, I think. Good enough. We can resample that as a loop. So that's now our sample chops for the main part, just this one audio loop. I do the same over here while everything's muted. Our breakdown, we're going to resample that. It's now going to go over here. This way we can run it through the individual buses and we can start tweaking volume levels and stuff. But we've got that set up. I think the next part would be to do the same, but for the bass line. So we've got a bass line on both of these. We will mute everything now, except the bass, which I think it's this one. And we can resample that as a loop. So that's our first bass line. If you want to be organized, you can name and color things. So if we click on these, it unmutes them basically. We know that anything that we want for the kind of build, we might just want to separate that out. We take a look at the samples and we open up the edit window. For any of these, we're looking at the sample, we can go to tools and I could change the color. So for this one, let's say I want to know the baseline is purple. We can do it like that. We know these two are sample chops. So let's say we want the sample chops to be a different color. One thing you can do is you can select them first and then we can color them and say all sample chops are going to be orange in this example. That way, when you're just kind of working out what pieces you've got later on, you can be organized. Because what we're going to do with the second sequence is we just want the bass line from that one. It's going to put it onto the next set of pads. Once you've got multiple banks with multiple pads, things can get pretty confusing. So let's do that. We're going to resample this one. So this bass line is the second bass line. It's going to move it over here. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to make sure we color this. We know the bass lines we want are going to be purple. Oops. Color was what I was looking for. And now we've got that set up. So we know our two bass lines are purple, the two sample chops are the orange. Our drums will just leave as blue. It's going to allow us to just tidy things up a little bit later. So we've got that set up. I don't think we need to do a huge amount more now, but we can actually get rid of a bunch of stuff that we don't need and start being organized. And this is the way that I would work just to kind of simplify things. Of course, you can leave all of these individual pieces, your sample chops, all of the effects, whatever it is. You can have them just scattered everywhere, but I like to be organized. The less things you have is the less things to mix. So ultimately, we want to bounce this down to chops, drums, bass line, and maybe just do one while we're here actually for the effects. Let's keep this one. Let's mute everything else again, including over here. We haven't put these in, so you shouldn't really need to mute them, but I'm going to mute them anyway. And then we're just going to take all of the effects and turn those on. So I think this is an effect. That's an effect. That one must be the vocal, which I think is okay. And I think that one's an effect as well. So we've got all of those. When we take a listen to the first one, you can hear that. Then the other effect kicks in. We'll resample that as a loop. It's going to move it over here. And we'll say everything with an effect is going to be green, some color, whatever. Doesn't really matter. But let's color that as green. That's going to be the effect samples. Move back to the sequences and just do the same with this one.
The world turns on its axis.
We've got something different going on. We'll resample that as a loop. It's going to put it here and do exactly the same thing. Select it and make sure the color is green. So now we can, tidy up our project. Coming back to the first bank, just going to turn everything back on for a second and we can lose what we don't need. So I don't need the sample chops anymore. None of these. This. And here. Our bassline we no longer need because we've created bassline resampled loop. And technically the same for all the effects, so we're getting rid of those. Just delete everything. And now I can just start moving things around. I'm going to unmute all of these so that we can see the colors. I'm going to put the sample chops in next. It makes duplicates, so you still need to tidy up and get rid of the older ones. And then I'm going to have my bass lines next. I'm going to take this one, move it over to bank A, and put it just in sequence, in order. We're going to get rid of this one. We can also get rid of this now. And then just move our effects over there as well. And we're just going to put those onto the next pad. Just some way of being organized. Take that over into here. And do it like that. So it's really simple now. We've got just a few basic elements that can be sent to different buses so you can use the mixer. So we know that the drums, if we go to our sample and open up the edit window, go to mix, we know that our drums are already going through to bus A. So when we're looking here, you can even name this if you want. So we could, I don't know, let's use one capital, call it drums. This is now the drum bus. This next one, we can delete this delay because it was only an effect that was being used on an individual pad before. It's all been bounced down, so it's no longer needed. But if we go here and say sample chops, this one, I'm going to send that to bus B. And this one, we're going to send it to bus B. And yeah, we'll now, whoops, my bad, wrong page. Let's use bus B and call this chops. So that's our chops. And we're going to do the same thing here for the bass line. I'm going to select this one, send it to bus C this time, and this one to bus C as well. That can be bass. And finally, all of the effects samples and things that we've got can go through to bus D. We can actually name it now if you want, of course. We could call this, let's just double click that and have it as effects. And it's good because when you're looking and you choose this one, when we select this now, you can see we can actually just select effects from this list and do the same here. So everything is now separated into the mixer. You do only get the 4 channels, the 4 buses with Koala, but you can see how you can work around that. Anything that's not going through one of these buses is just going directly to the main master channel, so you can still separate things off in the way that you want. Now that we've got it laid out like this, it means we've got volume sliders to change the volume. Sure, you can do it just using your volume here, but it's always nice to do it with like a mixer view. You can mute and solo, just work out your track the way that you want to. And the cool thing is that we've got 5 effect slots for each of these, so for some reason you want a little reverb on the drums, you want to do some other type of effect, we can apply all of that. And we've still got 5 effect slots that we can use for the master channel to just tweak things a little bit. One thing that we've done though is that we've moved all of the MIDI information. So when we play this now, it will be a bit of a jumbled mess. Now you can create new sequences if you want, but we'll come in and we'll just take a look at this first sequence as an example. We know this is our first sequence. The drums we've left as they were, so we don't need to do anything with that. But all of this other MIDI information is kind of useless. If we click even on this track and select this, we can delete that out, close that. And I can delete everything else from this loop as well. And that means we can then just start putting things in order. And really all that means is that we can choose the next pad. This one's the sample chops. And we can just drag it across for the whole 4 bars. Same here. It's not going to be playing all of these. You need to work out which ones you want. So let's take a look. we know that is the loop that we want. So when we're back at the sequence, we don't want to put in the MIDI for this next one. We want to jump over a step, and this should be the first bass line because I think we did it in order. So if we move over here, that should be the bass line. We can check all of this in a second, and then I think we'll want the first effect slot. So we skip one again, and that should be the first effect slot. So that really should be back now and should play as it's supposed to. In here it needs mixing, but that's how you sort these things out. In terms of our next one, this is the same. We want the drums just left as they are. This we don't need anymore, so we can delete. Close that down. And we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to delete all that MIDI information. So now we want to skip. This one is the sample chops we want for the next one. And really, it should just be a case of skipping all of them, and that should play. There we go. In terms of our intro sequence, might be easier at this point rather than deleting a bunch of stuff just to duplicate what we've got here. So we said that one of these was going to be the intro and one of them was like a little bit of a switch up. So I'm going to delete both of those. We're going to make a duplicate of this one. We're going to take out the drums, and that is now the intro. And if we take another copy of this one, we can just put our switch up back, which really just meant taking out some of the drums up to that point. Super basic, but pretty easy to work on, is what I'm trying to say. Notice there was just a random little bit of MIDI info down here. I'm not sure what that was. Maybe I just accidentally clicked on it. But again, just to be tidy and neat and so things don't get confusing, we'll just select that and delete it out. So we've now got all of the chunks for a song, for a sequence, and we've laid everything out. We can just do a little bit of mixing, and that should be pretty much it in order to build out what I would call a very basic beat. So let's do that. Let's just have a quick listen to some general levels. And because when you're making a beat, really, you should be thinking about those things beforehand. So general levels, nothing should be completely off. I don't think we're too far away. Bear in mind, if you like to use a little bit of compression, it makes things like quieter, louder, and obviously kind of controls and tames things. It's a good way of adding a little glue. So for me, probably a compressor, maybe just on the main channel to kind of dial things in a little bit. Normally, what I always say in these videos as well is if you're going to do some mixing, go away for half an hour, just get a drink, do something else, come back. I'm going to do it here for the sake of just trying to finish this off so that we've made pretty much a whole beat in one session. But normally I would take that break because you come back, your ears are tired, you've been listening to it over and over. You're going to hear things that you didn't hear before, you're going to pick up on levels and stuff. It's hard to do in one session, but just keep that in mind. So here, yeah, we've got our compressor. Let's have it running while the compressor's on. not perfect, but that's what I'm looking for from a compressor. Hopefully you could hear as we switch between the kind of just kind of A/B testing it, where you turn it off and on. When the drums aren't compressed, or certainly not compressed in relation to the sample chops and things, they're a little bit separate. Now, it can feel that way because of volume. So volume's something that you have to come back, and that's definitely where taking a break is going to be useful. Coming back, obviously listening on different systems and things. But that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking to kind of tame the drums down a little bit. I still want them to be punchy and to knock, but I don't want them to feel like this separate thing that's away from everything else. So I'm using compression to try and tame those a little bit. Depends on how fast your attack is. If you put too fast an attack, obviously it catches the transient of the kick drum. It can soften it a little bit too much. But that's what I'm looking for. I'm using it fairly narrowly. So I'm looking for just a little bit of glue, I suppose. That's what I'm looking for. Something to just squish it all together and, yeah, make it feel like it's all one uniform track. From there, a little bit of compression. When it comes to mastering things, simplicity, I think, is best. I don't think if you've got a bunch of things that you've got a bunch of problems and you have to try and fix all of them, it means there's something wrong before that. At the end, really, all you're adding is the sweetness. So a little compression to just glue things together. A little bit of EQ normally to boost levels, dial things in. If I think it's a little dull in the top end, I'll add a little bit more high end. Sometimes reduce the high end if it's a little shiny. But overall, all of these things you should be checking a little bit during the mix. And then at the end, it's just very subtle tweaks. Shouldn't be big sweeping changes where you're fixing something that was a problem earlier on. I hope that makes sense. Anyway, let's run through a little EQ. Again, very small differences, little duck in the mids, little high-end lift, little bit of low-end lift, but some of that will depend on how it translates once you actually bounce it down, try it in the car, try it on a bunch of different systems. For now, I'm just showing you some of the things that I would basically use. Here we can then set like a limiter. Limiter is always handy. One thing that I do like inside of here, and you can put this kind of anywhere inside of the chain as long as it's probably not the last thing. I do like the warble effect if you want that kind of tape, warble and wobble feel. We can use that and dial in the wow and flutter a little bit. Doesn't have to be a huge amount, but I would maybe put that in. And then what I would do here is a limiter. So obviously a limiter in terms of getting our max volume out, kind of using your gain. You've got attack and release, so it acts a little bit like a compressor as well. It's the same kind of thing. And we're going to use this to drive the volume. Now, before we go into doing that, on the final piece here, what you've got is it in utility or is it in something else? Is it meter? Meter is what we're looking for. This will give us our LUFS level. So if I want to finish this entire track just in one sitting here with Koala Sampler, not using anything else, I would come in and I would take a look at my LUFS volume. So what we can do is we can play this. We're getting about -14. It's getting close to Spotify level, actually, even just the way it is. So you probably wouldn't need to push it too hard. If you want something like, I think like CD mastering, they call it, or kind of that level, it's more kind of, I think everything down to sort of -9. You can make it a lot louder. You can drive it, push it harder. Now, when you're doing that, you're supposed to do it generally over the loudest part of your track. So this main sequence where everything is happening is the bit that I'm going to do it. Probably not going to do it using one of the other two sequences. Going to be doing it with this main one where I've got most of the stuff happening in the track. If we take a look at the limiter, let's drive it a little bit just to maybe try and get it up to bang on, or maybe just before -14 LUFS, which would be suitable for Spotify. Let's try it like that. The difficult bit is you have to just bounce between. It's not difficult, but you have to just keep bouncing back between the limiter and the meter. One thing that I would love to see with Koala is maybe a way that you could move these windows or have multiple windows where you could just kind of pin them open. That would make doing stuff like this pretty simple because I could just keep the limiter and the meter open and drive the gain until and just watch the meter at the same time. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's do it though. Looking for roughly -12. Again, spend a little bit more time tweaking that. I'm not going to do it here because it would take too long. But I just wanted to show you how that works in terms of getting the full track made. Because really, if you're happy enough with the mix, the samples, the sounds, the EQ, everything else that's going on, Koala Sampler is still one of the only ways that you can do that without having to resort to the DAW, to something else. My SP, my MPCs, there's no LUFS level, there's nothing to do that. So with Koala Sampler, this track is pretty much done. If that's what I wanted for the track, we would close this out. And you can do your track recording in whatever way you like. I kind of like doing it in real time because it's just more fun. It means you can bounce around a little more. Maybe I would add more variance to the sequence, and then you can bounce around to different pieces. But really, that's what I would do to put this track together. I can also use the effects in real time, and we can just record out a very basic mix. So we know when we finish recording this, we're roughly at -12 LUFS. It's going to be fine for putting it on Spotify, something like that. Let's go across to record song, and that's what we're going to do. We're just going to record out a very quick version. I'm not going to say this is perfect in one take. Sometimes it takes a couple of takes to get your rhythm right and make sure it's good. But for the purposes of this video, let's just piece this thing together. You will have to remember what your sequences are if you're going to do it that way. The other option, of course, that you've got is to set your sequences, create building blocks. So we'll do a quick example at the bottom. If this one's the intro, we put this one in. If the intro needs to be longer than what you've got set here, you can duplicate it. And as you bring these together, you can add them to the end. That's the one that I would use. I'm going to cancel that, add it to the end, and you can just put all of your sequences together. So I could just add in however many times I want my verse to repeat. Then the same for my chorus, my breakdown, whatever it is. You've got one long sequence then that you can just record out. If you don't want to do it in real time, I'm going to do it here in real time, just bounce between because I think it's kind of fun to do it that way. So it's not going to start recording until we press play. I'm going to start off my first sequence, and then I'm going to move over to the Perform tab. In fact, actually, I think you can just do it from here. There is the play button. I'm forgetting about that. Let's go to this vanilla page because I like using the filters, the stutter effect, a couple of things off this page. But we're now good to start putting the song together. As soon as we hit play, it's going to start recording. I'm not going to make it too long, but let's get going. There we go, song's finished. Now, that was very short. I forgot about the little variation where the drums dropped out. So those little things you would have to think about. And of course, if it was for a beat for an artist or somebody a little bit longer, I would, of course, let the chorus as the verse play a little bit longer, maybe the break. I just went back to the intro. That's a real simple way of having an introduction and then using that introduction as the outro part. Super simple stuff, but it's now recorded. All I'd need to do is give it a name. I don't know what we'll call this, but we'll just call it Koala Beat. Will do for now. Say OK, and it's going to ask me where I want to export that. I can save it to my files. I could send it to another application. In this case, I'm going to send it to Wavebox because that is an audio editing app. I believe this is free, I think. If it's not particularly expensive. But you can see here, it shows us our waveform. We've got our -12 LUFS. It's all compressed. It looks pretty nice. And one final thing that I would do, because we allowed it to play a little bit, is maybe just adjust the end point. So if we come in here, let's play this from here somewhere. Yeah. What I'm looking for was the extra little bit of tail. So I know by the end here, I want that thing to fade out. So I'm just going to zoom this right in, probably a little bit further, say from here. It's probably good enough. We can trim this, so we should be able to cut out the piece that we don't want. And then from the kind of end point here somewhere, from here, we could just select that. Let's select it from... I think from this point, how do you select on this? I can't remember. Do you do it this way? I think you select it. Why is it not letting? Oh, sorry. I think you have to be in this part here at the bottom, underneath this dotted line. Couldn't remember. But that allows us to make our selection. Probably from around there, I would just do a fade out. So you've got fade, lets us choose what we want, fade out, and apply. And there we go. If we zoom back out, we can deselect that, I'm assuming, by selecting it. We've created an entire track using Koala Sampler. We needed the wave editor just to tidy up, but if you were clever with Koala Sampler, the way you stop it and the way you've got it all set up, you probably wouldn't even need that. But I haven't had to use a DAW. That essentially could be a full track. It could go to Spotify. It's just a nice, easy workflow. Something that, just is pretty painless. If you don't like working inside the DAW, you don't want to have to mix a bunch of stuff, get lost in plugins. Just make your beats in Koala Sampler, use the tools that are there, and away you go. I'm going to leave it there for this episode. Hope you've enjoyed it. See you in the next one. Take care.